Hello guys!
Hey!
Welcome to this second episode of our videocast series about DevOps for financial services. My name is Juan Jose Rodriguez and I am VP of Engineering here on Clickit Smart Technologies.
And I'm Alfonso Valdez, the CEO and founder here at Clickit Smart Technologies.
How's everything going, Alfonso?
I'm very good. I'm very excited to have this DevOps talk about financial services and security. So let's start.
So guys, on the first episode, we talked a little about what are those main benefits and the business value that fintech companies can get from DevOps. So on this video, we will focus on one of the main concerns that these fintech companies have, which is security. And we will also talk about all the tools that those fintech companies can use on their internal processes. And most importantly, we will discuss about what are the most important requirements that fintech companies must implement in their processes in order to have a security just like a bank.
So let's start with the first requirement, which is DevSecOps.
That's good.
So what is DevSecOps? Well, initially, let's start thinking about what is DevOps. As you may know, DevOps is the alignment between development operations,
That's correct,
where operations need to understand development and development need to understand IT operations. Now we left security behind. Security needs to be injected between those two words as a DevSecOps. Also, it's known that DevSecOps needs to be included in the left side of your continuous delivery pipeline. And as well, the developer needs to think in a secure way. What I mean is to be like coding with security from the repository and from your IDE development tool in this case.
Okay, that's clear.
Also, what practices are covered in DevSecOps? Well, initially, the first practice is security testing, which includes SQL injection, cross-site scripting attacks, file inclusion, cross-site request forgery, and also broken authentication, which is very commonly where you can get lost or get stolen your password or your username. Something very paramount, it's you need to include in this security testing or this automated testing need to include the OWASP methodology. So those aspects that I have mentioned, SQL injection, are based on the OWASP methodology, where you can use the SAP tool. SAP tool use OWASP and also use those aspects. Now, a second practice is static code analysis, which is a white box testing, and it analyzes, or this practice has the ability to scan the repositories
That's interesting.
to search vulnerabilities, search errors, bugs, or any zero-day vulnerability as well. Another practice to consider is dynamic code analysis testing, which consists of running automated vulnerability assessment. Also, in this practice is lives in the testing phase. You can scan to a live testing website compared to a static analysis. It lives in the development phase. In the case of a static dynamic code analysis, lives in the testing case, where you can use pull requests, you can test input fields, forms, and you can use as well the Burp or SAP tool.
Okay.
Now there is another practice which is called interactive application security testing, which is another practice, but with more elaborated scenarios, patterns, and it's a complex test cases. You need to elaborate complex test cases, but can be automated as well. And the last practice is you have to analyze and review your operating system, your containers, your frameworks, and libraries, and you need to find vulnerabilities on those spaces. As you may know, in order to speed up your development, you get along or you work with open source tools, where those open source tools are from the community, so it needs to be tested very, very well in order to don't get any vulnerability. So using or analyzing containers operating system can help you with this practice. To conclude on this requirement, what DevSecOps tools are recommended by Clickit? Well, from my point of view, I will recommend Checkmarks, Veracode, SonarQube, or now it's SonarCloud, and also Sneak.
Now guys, we will go on the second requirement that every fintech company must have in order to comply with security, and that's having a threat intelligence system. It is a very common term over the technology environment, but let's define a threat intelligence system like having, first of all, a list of all the risks and the threats that your system can have for being on the internet. It can be hackers, it can be brute force attacks, it can be viruses, etc.
Yeah.
Secondly, you already have the plan, but you now need to count with the necessary tools to keep a constant monitoring over your applications and system. And here we can find, for example, an application level monitoring tool. We can also have, in this case, some IDS, intrusion detection systems, over in the server, so that we can detect if anyone can want to harm us or want to damage our system. And the third factor that defines a threat intelligence system is to have a list or a database, if you wanted to call it that way, with all the risks and the threats that you have faced in your experience during the operation of your application. And of course, you need to have all the paths and all the solutions that you used to get away from those risks and from those threats. So that will be, in summary, the definition of having a threat intelligence system. So perhaps you will ask yourself, well, what benefit can I get from having a threat intelligence system over my applications and systems? Well, just imagine this. If you have a threat intelligence system, you will have full vision and constant vision over what's going on your system. You will have full vision on all those possible attacks that you may suffer on the internet, and of course you will be able to take corrective action in order to avoid this in the immediate future. So you can see that if you are prepared to face these risks and you are prepared to face these threats, then your application will suffer less downtime, will suffer less damage, and of course you will have happier customers that will make more business for you.
I agree with you, totally.
So that's the main business value that you can get from having a threat intelligence system. And now, if we want to know what tools can be useful for having a basic threat intelligence system over our applications and system, will be number one, an application level monitoring tool such as New Relic, which is the tool that we most use here on Clickit. Then, if you want to have intrusion detection systems, we have OSEC, which is a very good option for us. And then we have some other and more complex tools such as Twistlock and ThreatStack, which give us more vision over all the server processes that are going on, all the file changes that you can have on the servers. They inform you about all the activity of the users that are interacting with your systems. So they're pretty complete and they're pretty how can we say that? Pretty exact on the reports that they give to you. And our base recommendation to implement a threat intelligence system is to start for implementing an application level monitoring tool such as New Relic and having a complex tool such as Twistlock and ThreatStack for the start. That's a basic understanding and that's a basic implementation of a threat intelligence system on your application. But of course, you can extend that according to your requirements. Okay.
So the third requirement is cloud security and automation. First, we need to dissect in four significant aspects. The first one is security automation, which is the engineering process to handle repetitive tasks related to security without human intervention or manual interaction. That's the core thing that you need to do. Now, that includes vulnerability assessment, scanning, server hardening, and security testing.
Okay.
On the aspect. So, how you can perform security automation? Well, you need a configuration management system similar to Ansible, Terraform, or even AWS CloudFormation. So what is a CMS? What's a configuration management system? Well, it's a platform to automate sysadmin and DevOps tasks. Now, something important about the CMS is that you have already templates, already pre-built configurations where you can secure your environment. Imagine that you are a financial company and you're required to include a new application, an API application, for example, and that application needs to be PCI compliant. If you bring up those templates coming from a security automation, either using Ansible, AWS CloudFormation, or even Terraform, you can build very fast. Another example that I usually try to explain to our clients is that if you adopt security automation, you can recover from a data breach more faster.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because if you get hacked or you suffer from a data breach, you can apply that patching in a few seconds with just one command, compared without security automation, where you will have to patch to the entire farm of servers.
That's pretty optimal, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Something important that I have here is that you need to secure as well your continuous delivery pipeline, from permissions, deployment, access management, keys, and more. Now, the second aspect is encryption, which is a very important topic. It can be said it's segmented in different aspects, elements, but we added here in this section where financial services need to encrypt everything, all communications, all the storage, and anything that can be connecting or communicating between them. First of the encryption, I would suggest using or encrypting disk, an EBS or S3.
That's for start.
Also, you need to encrypt, or you need to have a private network using a VPN alongside with a VPC. As you may know, we need best practice for Amazon, which including a VPC, you need to design or also segment a public and private network, adding the databases or private servers obviously in the private network, and also the load balancer or any public API included in the public cloud, on the public network.
Okay.
Well. Something important to mention is that you need to encrypt your web server using TLS or SSL protocols.
Very important item.
The APIs, and also the communication between the containers and services. That's a very important item.
Okay.
And also, finally, the database encryption needs to be encrypted whenever you need or require to pull over some data. It's recommended that sensitive information needs to be encrypted. And the third aspect is access management. So we should start with what is a KMS, or what is a cache management system. Well, definitely it's just a tool to save passwords, secrets, tokens on APIs.
Okay.
Whenever you need to save any critical information, you should have a KMS. So what are the tools recommended for this aspect or this first kind of service? Well, I would recommend HashiCorp Vault. I would recommend as well AWS KMS and also Google Cloud KMS.
Okay.
Another practice that it's important is to add user policies, where you need to organize your access from servers, applications, and the AWS organizations. Because you have developers, you have operations, you might have a sys administrator or even a project manager which would like to have access to the resources. So it's very important that organizations have a user policy on this aspect.
Okay.
Now, the fourth aspect is benchmarks and checklists. So what does it mean that? Well, it's important that any corporation or financial services need to run a checklist after any implementation.
Okay.
Or even if you have been working in a DevOps implementation or in a security automation, you can get misconfiguration. You can forget, perhaps you launched a new application and you forgot to secure, you forgot to use or leverage the best practices. So it's important to use a checklist. In this case, I would recommend use the NIST framework, which is a cyber security framework. And the last framework that I would recommend is the CIS, framework, which is the Center for Information Security. And that last framework is more focused by technology and services. For example, Nginx, you could harden or you can run that checklist based on Nginx, compared to the needs framework where you have a checklist by industry or regulations.
Okay. The fourth specific requirements for security that every fintech company must have is security compliance. And what do we mean with security compliance? Well, we mean to get the fintech business or the fintech IT processes compliant with international standards such as PCI and SOC 2. PCI is more focused on the security for the information of credit cards from customers, and SOC 2 is more focused on getting security over the infrastructure level of the fintech applications. Yeah. So we could say that they are both complement of each other, but nowadays PCI is being more widely used across the fintech and IT market. Yeah. And that's actually one thing that we will recommend on ClickIt, that you first focus on get compliant with PCI instead of SOC 2, but you can do both if you want. Now, the interesting part here, or perhaps one of the questions that you may have, is what are those main items that could help me as a fintech to get compliant with PCI or SOC 2? Well, they share many of the standards of the regulations, but one of them is to perform continuous penetration tests, either internally by the own system administrators, or the most recommended thing here is implementing the ethical hacking of third parties and let them make those penetration tests for you so that they can exploit all your vulnerabilities. Okay, so the second item to get compliant is to run continuous vulnerability assessments over the systems and application. You can either do it manually or you can use tools such as perhaps Nessus or something like that, and that will give you another of the items that will help you to get compliant. Continuous vulnerability assessment. Okay, the third item that PCI and SOC 2 consider in their process is the database replication, failover, and encryption. You mentioned the topic of encryption, which is a very important one. So here we found it again. PCI and SOC 2 put special attention over the data encryption. Why? Because as we said, they're primarily focused on securing the credit card information and the infrastructure overall. So that's another important part. A fourth item that will help you to get compliant is to implement a threat monitoring system or a threat intelligence system, which was the point number 2 of the requirements that we have just mentioned, right? And the last item that will help you get compliance is the first item that we mentioned in this video, which is DevSecOps. So you can see that it's not really hard to get compliant with PCI or SOC 2 or to comply with some of the most important of their items. But of course, you should always do it assessed by an expert, and of course, you need to know what to do on those cases. Now, if you ask us, we strongly recommend that you prefer to get compliant with PCI and to always make sure that you have your database encrypted, that you have replication for that database in case that one of the databases crashes, then you have a backup for that, and that you have failover for that database as well, so that in case you have emergencies, perhaps the database got crashed, the database got messed up. So if you have failover, if you have replication, you can always have a copy of that database and restore it. So we really encourage the fintech companies to get compliant with PCI or SOC 2 because your customers will ask that to you. Your users will be more confident that the service that they are using is reliable and that will be available at all time. Okay?
So now guys, let's conclude with the security DevOps toolchain. So the first element it's DevSecOps. So what are the best recommendations for DevSecOps? In my opinion, will be Sonatype, which is a cost-effective solution for startups and small and medium business. But if you are an enterprise, you have a good budget, I would recommend Checksmart because it's very robust and is leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant.
Okay, now for threat intelligence, I mentioned that before, but I mention it again. The tools that we recommend for you to have a threat intelligence system, it's number one, an application level monitoring tool, New Relic. That's the one that we recommend. And secondly, a complex threat intelligence system such as Twistlock or ThreatStack.
Nice. Now for cloud security, well, the most known is AWS. I would recommend adopt AWS and use the toolchain of that cloud. What includes that? I would say AWS CloudFormation for your security automation, CloudTrail, also WAF, VPC, enable disk encryption, and also use or leverage AWS Macy,
correct,
etc.
So guys, this is the end for this episode. We expect that this is useful for you. We expect that you have learned a lot about what are the most important requirements that every fintech company must have regarding security and how DevOps can help them to comply with those requirements. So we're really happy that you have watched this video, and well, we will see you in the third episode for this videocast series, correct?
Yeah. See you later.
See you later.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you really like this video, then give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe in our YouTube channel and be aware of the newest videos in the DevOps Talks.